What happens when emotional tension hits a family trip? The unspoken lessons. Family vacations are often painted in shades of excitement and joy. They are those rare moments when we leave behind the stresses of everyday life to embrace nature, fresh air, and most importantly, the company of loved ones. It's in these moments that we create memories, sometimes unforgettable ones, that shape the relationships we cherish. But have you ever thought about how a seemingly simple family trip can sometimes test your emotions in unexpected ways? How small things, like an uncomfortable car ride, can reveal the depths of patience, compromise, and, yes, emotional control? Let me introduce you to my story. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 38 years old. I live in sunny Santa Monica with my husband, Ethan, and our blended family. Ethan is a dedicated father to his son, Oliver, who's 16, and together, we have a vibrant 9-year-old daughter, Lily. While we all share a sense of love and care, there's an underlying tension, a natural gap between a stepmother and stepson. The bond that I share with Lily feels effortless, but with Oliver, it's more complicated, often defined by silence and the unspoken understanding of boundaries. This was never more evident than on our trip to the serene beaches of Malibu. It was supposed to be a day of sunshine, laughter, and bonding, but in the midst of all the excitement, we were about to face a challenge that would push us all in ways we didn't expect. It was one of those idyllic mornings where everything seems to align, the sun casting its golden glow on the ocean, the salty breeze ruffling the palm trees, and the laughter of children playing in the sand. The promise of a peaceful day by the beach was everything we needed. We packed a cooler with sandwiches, brought our favorite beach towels, and set off on the short drive from our home to Malibu's iconic shoreline. Lily, ever the social butterfly, was excited to build sandcastles and jump into the surf, while Oliver, a bit more reserved, claimed his spot under the umbrella with a book. Ethan and I were content to just soak in the beauty of the moment, occasionally joining in the beach games and chats. The day passed in a blur of fun, sand between our toes, and the sounds of waves crashing in the background. It was the perfect family outing. But as the sun began to dip lower in the sky and we packed up to head home, something unexpected happened. The carefree vibe of the day quickly began to unravel, though in a way that I could never have imagined. Anyone who has ever tried to pack a car with a family of 5 knows that it's a logistical nightmare. You see, Ethan drives a compact SUV, perfect for the two of us when it's just the adults or Lily and me, but 5 people? A whole different ballgame. Lily, eager to get a front seat view, insisted on sitting next to Ethan, while I took my place in the back, ready to squeeze in beside Oliver. As we tried to juggle the cooler, towels, and various beach paraphernalia, the cramped space made it feel as though the walls were closing in. It wasn't long before I noticed Oliver's discomfort. He shifted awkwardly in his seat, trying to find a more comfortable position, but the space was too tight. I could tell he wasn't speaking up about it, not wanting to cause a scene, but his body language told a different story. He was trying his best to avoid eye contact, his posture stiff and tense. I, too, felt the discomfort creeping in, but I did my best to keep my composure. This wasn't a big deal. A few minutes of uncomfortable seating, and we'd be home, right? But as the minutes ticked by, something more than physical discomfort started to weigh on me. I began to feel a subtle but noticeable tension building in the car. Ethan, ever the peacemaker, tried to maintain his usual calm demeanor, but I could tell even he was starting to sense the unease. As we maneuvered through the winding roads of the Malibu hills, the car bounced, amplifying the discomfort, and my patience began to wear thin. I shifted uncomfortably, feeling my leg pressed against Oliver's, a situation that felt all too intimate for 2 people who didn't share a close bond. His silence, while not hostile, seemed to echo in the air, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of it. He wasn't complaining. He wasn't making a fuss. But I knew something was off. And that's when the first crack in my emotional control appeared. As we continued the drive, I couldn't help but feel my anxiety rise. It wasn't just about the physical discomfort anymore, it was the emotional undercurrent that had been building all day. I had tried so hard to be the cool stepmom, to act as if everything was fine with Oliver, but in that confined space, with our personal boundaries so close, It felt like everything I had been suppressing was bubbling to the surface. The silence between Oliver and me was palpable. I wanted to reach out, to say something, but the words felt inadequate. Should I talk to him about it? Should I let him know that I understood his discomfort too? But something held me back. A sense of responsibility. A sense of needing to respect the space between us. I looked out the window, trying to focus on the beauty of the hills, the stretching vistas of Malibu, the golden sunset casting long shadows over the road. But the view didn't comfort me. Instead, it seemed to highlight the distance between us, a distance that wasn't just physical, but emotional. The discomfort in my chest began to grow. It wasn't just the heat, or the cramped space, or even the proximity to Oliver. It was that feeling of vulnerability, the rawness of being forced to confront the limits of our relationship. How far would this tension go? Could I still act like everything was fine? And then came the moment of truth. The car hit a sharp turn, and the vehicle lurched to one side, throwing us all momentarily off balance. It was a small thing, but in that instant, I felt like everything had shifted. I tightened my grip on the seat, desperately trying to regain composure. My heart raced. My breath quickened. I could feel Oliver's presence beside me, his body stiff and unmoving. The tension in the air was thick, and I didn't know how much longer I could bear it. But just as quickly, I caught myself. I reminded myself that this trip wasn't about the discomfort. It wasn't about the awkwardness. It was about the people I was with. It was about our family. And in that moment, I decided that the only way through the discomfort was to acknowledge it, without letting it control me. I took a deep breath. I smiled to myself, knowing that this, too, would pass. The uncomfortable ride would end. The tension would dissipate. And we would get home. Together. As we finally neared home, the tension in the car slowly began to dissipate. We exchanged light-hearted words about the day, about the funny moments, the beautiful sunset, and the joy of spending time as a family. But underneath it all, I knew that the tension we'd experienced in that car wasn't just about the cramped space. It was about the emotional landscape of our family, one that, like any landscape, was constantly shifting and evolving. And in that moment, I realized something important: the road ahead was not always going to be smooth. There would be bumps. There would be uncomfortable silences. There would be moments of tension. But what mattered most was how we navigated them. How we chose to react. How we chose to understand each other. I wanted to hold on to that lesson, to remind myself that emotional control is not just about keeping your cool in a moment of discomfort. It's about understanding that discomfort is a part of life. It's about embracing the awkwardness, the tension, and the vulnerability. And most importantly, it's about learning to manage it in a way that strengthens relationships, rather than tearing them apart. The rest of the evening passed quietly. As we unpacked the car and went about our evening routine, I couldn't help but reflect on what had just transpired. I realized that this trip, this uncomfortable car ride, had given me a gift. It had shown me the importance of emotional awareness and control, and the power of recognizing, accepting, and overcoming the discomfort that comes with being part of a family. The next few days after our trip were eerily quiet. It wasn't that anything had gone wrong, it was more the unspoken weight of the car ride that seemed to linger in the air, unacknowledged but ever present. The atmosphere in the house was subdued, like a storm cloud that hadn't yet broken. Everyone was busy with their routines, but it felt as though we were all quietly walking around a delicate subject, too afraid to address it. I tried my best to move past it. After all, what had happened wasn't catastrophic, right? A little discomfort, a little tension. Surely it would fade with time. But as the days went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just a cramped car ride. And then, one evening, as I sat alone in the living room with a cup of tea, I realized that what had started as an external discomfort had become something far deeper. Something that needed to be addressed, not just for my sake but for everyone involved. I began to think more about Oliver. He had always been a quiet kid, polite but reserved. He never seemed to mind my presence, yet I could tell that there was a certain emotional distance between us. I often wondered whether he truly felt comfortable around me or if he was just going along with the flow of things, as kids often do in blended families. In those quiet moments of reflection, I realized that it wasn't just about the awkwardness in the car. It was about a deeper, more complex dynamic between us, a dynamic that was shaped by years of silence, distance, and unspoken boundaries. We hadn't had a major falling out. We hadn't argued. But we also hadn't really connected in any meaningful way. And I couldn't help but wonder whether the discomfort I felt during that drive had less to do with the cramped space and more to do with the emotional space we both inhabited. I thought about how we had both tried to avoid the elephant in the room. I had been pretending that everything was fine, that the silence between us didn't matter. But it did. And deep down, I knew that unless we addressed it, the tension would only grow, turning into something more toxic, something harder to ignore. One evening, after dinner, I decided to take a small but significant step. I couldn't let things fester any longer. I needed to acknowledge the awkwardness and invite Oliver into a space of honesty, without any pressure, just a simple conversation. I found him in the living room, sitting on the couch, headphones on, lost in his world. It wasn't easy, but I walked over and gently tapped him on the shoulder. He looked up, surprised, but his expression softened when he saw that I wasn't there to ask him about his schoolwork or what he wanted for dinner. "Hey, Oliver, do you have a minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light but sincere. He nodded, pulling off his headphones. I could tell he was unsure of where this conversation was heading, but I appreciated that he didn't shy away from it. "Yeah, sure," he said quietly. I sat beside him, close but not too close, giving him the space I had always tried to respect. I cleared my throat, gathering my thoughts before speaking. "I've been thinking about our trip," I began, watching his reaction carefully. "I know it wasn't the most comfortable ride home, and I just wanted to check in with you. How are you feeling about it?" His brow furrowed, and for a moment, he looked away, probably gathering his own thoughts. Then, in a soft voice, he replied, "I'm okay. It wasn't that bad. Just tight, you know?" I smiled, appreciating his honesty. "Yeah, it was definitely tight. But I've also been thinking about how it felt in the car, not just physically but emotionally. Sometimes, in situations like that, things can get uncomfortable. And I realized that maybe I haven't done a good job at making sure you feel comfortable with me." His gaze shifted towards me, and for the first time, I noticed a small crack in the emotional wall I had been struggling to understand. "I don't know," he said, shrugging slightly. "It's fine, Rebecca." "Really?" It was clear to me now that his fine wasn't just about the car ride. It was about everything else, the unsaid things between us, the distance that had been there for years. I felt a tug at my heart as I continued. "I know it's not easy being part of a blended family," I admitted, my voice steady but emotional. "And I can't pretend to know exactly how you feel, but I want you to know that I'm here. You're not just Ethan's son, you're a part of this family too. And if there's anything that's bothering you, anything you want to talk about, I'm ready to listen." For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, Oliver shifted in his seat, his eyes meeting mine for the first time with an openness that took me by surprise. "It's just, sometimes it feels like I don't belong here. Like it's not really my family." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle deep within me. It wasn't a shocking revelation, but hearing him say it aloud made everything so much clearer. I had been so focused on maintaining peace and avoiding conflict that I had neglected to truly understand how he felt. The emotional distance I had sensed in the car was the result of years of trying to fit into a family that, in his eyes, didn't fully include him. I took a deep breath and reached out, placing my hand gently on his. "Oliver, I can't pretend to be your mom. I know that's not what you need. But I want you to know that I care about you. I want you to feel like you're part of this family, even if it's not always perfect." He didn't immediately respond, but he didn't pull away either. That, to me, was progress. And in that moment, I realized that emotional control wasn't just about holding back during uncomfortable situations. It was about being vulnerable, admitting when things were tough, and allowing others to do the same. It was about breaking down the walls we had both built around ourselves, even if it was one small conversation at a time. As we sat there in silence, I could feel the tension between us beginning to dissolve. It wasn't gone completely, but it was a start. And sometimes, that's all you need, to begin the journey of healing, one step at a time. After the conversation with Oliver, something shifted in the house. It wasn't an instant transformation, and it wasn't like everything was magically fixed, but there was an undeniable difference. The walls that had once existed between us, silent and unspoken, had started to crumble, and in their place, a newfound sense of openness began to emerge. It wasn't just about the tension in the car ride anymore. It wasn't just about the cramped space or the discomfort. It was about understanding that sometimes, the most powerful moments in a family don't come from grand gestures or perfect outings. They come from the simple act of sitting down, acknowledging the discomfort, and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. That's where true connection happens. The days that followed were filled with little moments of progress. Conversations that would have previously been avoided, out of fear, discomfort, or uncertainty, began to take place more freely. Ethan and I talked more openly about our relationship and the challenges of raising a blended family. I began to recognize that many of the issues I had been ignoring were just as much about me as they were about Oliver. My own insecurities had prevented me from truly connecting with him. As I sat down with Ethan one night, sharing my thoughts about the emotional distance that had existed between us, he listened attentively. I told him how the uncomfortable car ride had forced me to confront things I had been brushing aside for far too long. "I think the trip taught me something I hadn't realized before," I said, looking at Ethan with sincerity. "It made me realize that we need to be more open with each other. We need to talk about the things that make us uncomfortable, not just the easy stuff. We can't be afraid to have those difficult conversations, because that's how we move forward." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "You're right," he said. "I've always tried to keep the peace, but sometimes peace just means ignoring the real issues. We've got to be willing to face them head-on." And that's exactly what we did. Together, we began to rebuild the emotional foundations of our family, brick by brick. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but we were committed to the process. Each conversation, each shared moment of vulnerability, brought us closer. I found myself appreciating Ethan's patience and willingness to engage in these difficult conversations. And Oliver, too, started to open up more, finding comfort in the fact that we were all learning how to communicate better. A week after our heartfelt conversation, Ethan and I decided to take another trip, this time to the mountains. We knew we needed to get away again, but this time, there was no pressure to create the perfect vacation. We weren't trying to chase an idealized version of family life. Instead, we were going to embrace the imperfections, the awkward moments, and the chance to simply be present with each other. As we set out for the mountains, the car ride was markedly different. There was no tension, no discomfort hanging in the air. Instead, we shared stories, laughed at inside jokes, and even paused to enjoy the scenic views together. Oliver, for the first time, seemed to genuinely relax. His usual silence had been replaced by conversations about his interests, his school life, and his thoughts on the world around him. "Dad, do you think we could go on a road trip sometime?" Oliver asked, his voice light and unguarded. Ethan looked over at me, a small smile playing on his lips. "Sure, buddy. We can make that happen." I smiled, feeling the warmth of the moment fill the car. It was a simple question, but it carried so much weight. It was a sign that Oliver was finally feeling like part of the family, that he wasn't just an observer in our lives, but an active participant. As we drove through the winding mountain roads, the conversations flowed easily. There was no forced small talk. No discomfort. We were just four people, 3 adults and 1 teen, connecting in a way that felt natural and easy. The trip wasn't about the destination. It wasn't about the perfect family outing. It was about the journey, about how we had grown together, about the emotional distance that had once separated us and how we had closed that gap with simple acts of vulnerability and understanding. Looking back on it now, I realize that the family trip to Malibu wasn't just a lesson in emotional control. It was a lesson in growth, understanding, and the power of connection. We had faced a moment of discomfort, but in doing so, we had transformed it into something meaningful. We had confronted the unspoken tension, the emotional walls we had built around ourselves, and we had chosen to break them down, bit by bit. The trip to the mountains was a testament to how far we had come. It wasn't about avoiding discomfort or pretending everything was perfect. It was about embracing the imperfections, the awkwardness, the silence, the tension, and learning how to navigate them with compassion and honesty. As a family, we learned that the most meaningful connections aren't formed in moments of ease, but in the times when we choose to face the discomfort together. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to share our emotions, and to truly listen to one another, that's when the real magic happens. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? It's simple: don't shy away from the discomfort. Don't be afraid to have the difficult conversations. And most importantly, don't let the small moments of tension define your relationships. Use them as opportunities to grow, to connect, and to become stronger together. Family isn't about perfection. It's about learning, growing, and loving through the ups and downs, the awkward moments, and the quiet spaces. And when we choose to face those moments with honesty and vulnerability, we unlock the true strength of our relationships. The story of Rebecca and her family is one of transformation and growth, set against the backdrop of a seemingly simple family trip that turned into a powerful lesson about vulnerability, emotional control, and connection. What began as an uncomfortable car ride with tense, unspoken feelings slowly unraveled into a journey of self-awareness, mutual understanding, and emotional bonding. The discomfort Rebecca felt in the cramped car, compounded by her strained relationship with her stepson, Oliver, was not just about physical space, it was about the emotional distance that had grown between them over time. At first, Rebecca tried to ignore the tension, convincing herself that it would pass. But over time, she realized that ignoring discomfort, whether emotional or physical, only causes it to fester. It was only when she acknowledged her own feelings and bravely reached out to Oliver, opening the door for honest communication, that the true healing began. The simple act of expressing her discomfort, listening to Oliver's silent struggles, and having a conversation that was grounded in mutual respect and vulnerability changed the trajectory of their relationship. And as a family, they began to heal. Rebecca learned that emotional control wasn't just about holding back in moments of discomfort, but about acknowledging it, owning it, and allowing others the space to do the same. The car ride became a metaphor for their family's larger emotional landscape, a reminder that unresolved tension can affect relationships, but confronting it with compassion can lead to understanding, growth, and connection. This journey didn't end with the Malibu trip. It continued with small but significant moments where the family chose to face their challenges together. It was about learning to communicate openly, embracing the awkwardness of those difficult conversations, and finding ways to be more present and understanding with each other. Through these steps, they created a deeper bond, a family built not on perfection but on honesty, empathy, and the willingness to grow together. The central lesson of this story is that true emotional growth begins when we choose to face discomfort instead of running from it. Whether it's in a family setting, a friendship, or a romantic relationship, ignoring the tension only creates more distance. We can all learn from Rebecca's journey that vulnerability, though difficult, is the key to breaking down emotional barriers. When we allow ourselves to be honest, to admit when things aren't perfect, and to express our feelings with kindness and respect, we invite growth and understanding into our lives. In our own relationships, whether personal or professional, we must remember that growth happens in the most uncomfortable spaces. When faced with awkwardness or tension, we shouldn't shy away from it. Instead, we should face it head-on, embrace it, and use it as an opportunity to connect, to communicate, and to strengthen our bonds. Just like Rebecca and Oliver, we can choose to break down the walls that separate us by being open and vulnerable with each other. So, the next time you feel uncomfortable or disconnected from someone you care about, remember Rebecca's story. Take a deep breath, acknowledge the discomfort, and reach out with compassion. That's how real transformation happens. If this story resonated with you and you feel inspired to embrace vulnerability in your own life, make sure to hit the subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll be supporting the channel, which helps motivate us to create more insightful and inspiring content like this. We're here to explore real-life lessons, deepen our emotional understanding, and share stories that inspire growth. Stay tuned for more captivating stories that will empower you on your journey to personal development. See you in the next video.